Alright, so take two. YouTube says that I can rotate my camera to stream in landscape, and I am not so sure about this. So, we're going to find out. Phone is a liar. Alright. Well then, please bear with me while I try to adjust the camera. I think that the trickiest part of live streaming is figuring out where all the tech is at. Alright, that looks like it'll work for us for today. This new lamp armature thing is pretty incredible. It's just taking a little bit of getting used to. Alright, here we are. So, good morning. I am 1 cup of coffee into my day, unfortunately only one. So, we're going to drink a 2nd cup of coffee and get started. So today what I'm working on is, do you remember the map samples that I was doing a little while ago? We're going to start the map for that commission for Joshua and get that underway. I would like to get it done today, so this first section that we're working on is just going to be getting everything roughed out so that I can go in later and start adding all of the detail. So, getting started usually means having a copy of the map that the client wants done and having it kind of printed out to the size that I want to use as my template. This is particularly important if people have rivers and very specific proportions that they want to use for their project. There are people who put an incredible amount of work into developing their maps in terms of having scales accurately represented by distances and what have you. So I try to make sure that I honor that as much as possible. So what I'm going to be working on while we're doing this live stream is I'm going to be lightboarding based off of the original map that I was given. So you can kind of see now that I've turned the light on underneath that we've got the rivers that are going on up here. They're the primary geographical feature for this map, so it's really important to me that I keep their shape really integral to what's going on. I know that I've got some mountains up around these edges here, and I know what the density of the forests are going to look like. When I was speaking with the client, we decided that he was going to go with this level of detail within the map, so it's going to give us kind of a rough, more scout map kind of feel to things versus some of the other details that are going on. I'm working in 11 by 17. The final map will be resized in Photoshop down to an 8 by 10. This gives us a chance to put in more details. Come on, camera. There we go. And keep that really lovely kind of level of detail when I'm providing him with a smaller map. So I am working with a 2H pencil. I like 2H because it's fairly thin in terms of lines. The lines are nice and light, but it's still not too difficult to erase, which can be a problem with harder lead pencils because they have a tendency to really gouge your paper. I like it. It seems to be kind of the best balance for me in terms of dark enough to see, light enough to erase, not leaving a ton of extra graphite on the page the way that I find that HB does when I'm doing something like this. It's really important for me to try and keep the paper as clean as possible, particularly if we're not doing anything that might mask the cleanliness of the paper afterwards, like adding color with marker or watercolor. Gary says, good morning. Thanks, Myrna. Hi, Gary. So I'm back. We spent the Canadian Labor Day long weekend at a gathering called Nerdly North, which is something that friends of mine put on every year. It's basically a giant slumber party for 50 of your closest friends kind of thing that happens every Labor Day long weekend. We rent out usually a Bible camp, but whatever kind of camp we can find that will sleep a lot of people. And for the weekend, and everyone brings their board games, and we all hang out and play an incredible amount of games for the course of 3.5 days. It's a communal kitchen, so we share breakfast and lunch, and then each of us is kind of responsible for feeding ourselves our own dinner. And it's a great way to see people that I don't get to see that often because I don't live in the same city as them. It's a good place to play new games that I've never heard of before. And just kind of have a weekend to completely nerd right out with other people who are as into the same kind of things as I am. And that's really cool. I wish that we had more events like that as a society that are different from kind of a con atmosphere. I like cons, but I find them overwhelming just because the sheer volume of people can really dig into my brain after a while. I'm somebody that struggles a bit with anxiety, so too many people all at once can get overwhelming. Nerdly is really good for that because we have a culture of really understanding disabilities and mental health issues, so you don't have to feel bad if you're overwhelmed. You can just be like, hey, I'm kind of not here right now. I need to go chill. And there's almost always a space to go chill. And other people who also want to chill, or you can go back to your cabin and rest or whatever you like. So it was really fun. My intention had been to LARP a bit more this year because there's a couple of people who play really, really fantastic small format, like role-playing LARPs. And I didn't get a chance to do that as much as I wanted to, but it was still pretty fantastic. So yeah, I'm home from that. It typically takes me about 24 hours to kind of get my brain back online. Just do I call it my hardcore introvert recovery time. I don't really want to talk to anybody for the first day after Nerdly, just because I need that time to be quiet and chill. So I came home, I read 700-page novel, and wrote on my book for a little while, which is really rewarding. I'm starting to feel really good about getting back into that particular project. I've been away from it for a little while. And then, yeah, just kind of getting back into the groove of doing the commissions now. And it's been really nice. So we've worked on this map a bit before. Where is my eraser? Oh, I have blue on my eraser. Maybe let's get that off. So we know this section really well because this was the section that I did all of the map rough up for before, so we know that that's going to be there. I guess the big disadvantage to 2H pencil is that you guys really can't see what I'm doing, can you? Alright, well we need that, and then we have some forest going on right here. We have a little bit more right here. And some more over here. And then Alito's stronghold is right here, thereabouts. And we have a lot of forest going on in there. So when I'm doing this, I'm just focusing on getting shapes in place to let me know kind of what my major masses are doing. And then once I have that, I can go in and start refining them into the various pieces that we need them to be. So this is my one major landmark that's down here. So make sure we have that roughed in. And this is going to be the logging camp up here. So we'll get that tidied up, sketched in properly. So we know that the forest goes kind of up through here, and it's quite dense on this side of the river. And we know that it kind of comes down this way. And down and around here. And in there. And it comes quite close to the river on the bottom here. If you look at aerial photos of how the land forms around rivers, frequently when you're seeing a forest, you're actually not even really seeing the gap around the edge. Usually you just see kind of like a highway that is just the water. And I think that's really cool, but it's not always easy for a human brain to understand that that's what the gap is the water. So we have a tendency in fantasy map making to kind of create a bit more space around that so that the human brain doesn't have to work so hard to do the deciphering. That's one of the coolest things actually about map making, is figuring out how we recognize what it is that we're looking at. It just is really, really neat in terms of what is the symbolism that actually registers in our brain. I remember taking an art class once, quite a while ago, pardon me, I'm just digging out a reference here, where it was a human physiology class for figure drawing. And the teacher was saying one of the things that you need to know is that humans really don't recognize other humans without being able to see collarbones. There's something in the way that collarbones connect to the shoulders that creates a particular shape that apparently we humans have learned to completely cue on as a way that we recognize other humans. And I had no idea. I had never heard that before. It seemed really strange to me when she first said it. And I was quite perplexed by it. And then she started showing us pictures of, like, images of people with this process smoothed out so that it kind of looked like a shape. And it was really strange. It was like looking at aliens. And it kind of gave me a, oh, all right, that makes more sense. So yeah, I have a tendency to keep in mind that what I'm drawing is not necessarily what everyone is always seeing. Just need to close my door here. I forgot to do that. Feeling a little bit disorganized this morning. But that's okay, because I've got a pencil and a paper, and that makes my life really good. So yeah, in terms of just recognizing that what we think we see is not always what we see is really interesting. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with the artist Danny Gregory. He runs an institution called Sketchbook School. School Skool. He has basically built an empire of sorts on teaching people who think that they can't draw to draw. And I love what he does because he's making art so much more accessible to everyone, and I think that that's super important. And he's also kind of removing some of the gatekeeping that goes along with this idea of artists being a certain kind of person and a certain kind of talent level, which I think is nonsense. If you can put a pencil in your hand, you can draw. You may or may not be comfortable doing it, and you may or may not think what you produce is any good, but you can do it. Drawing is just putting marks on a piece of paper. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. But a huge part of getting good at drawing is learning to actually see what's in front of you when you're doing life drawing and not what you assume is there. One of the hardest things about any of the art classes that I took when I was young was spending the time to actually see what was going on for me in front of whatever it was that I was doing. I remember once trying to paint a still life that had like a book and a rosary and stuff in it. And it was just objects that had been in my house. And it was for a class, and I was like, okay, this is going to happen and we'll get it done and it'll be fine. And it was so frustrating because I had never, despite holding that rosary and working with it a lot, it was a gift from a friend of mine. I had never really sat down and studied it in a way that would give me the impression of what it would look like on a piece of paper. I remember that it had like carved whorls in it in the wood of the beads, and I remember that I just thought it was beautiful, which is why I decided I was going to paint it. But man, I had never thought about what it actually looked like, just that it was beautiful. And so when it took hours because I had to learn to look at it. It wasn't the time spent painting, it was the time spent learning to see what it was that I was actually working on. That was what took forever. And Danny Gregory is really good at kind of demystifying that process. And what I love about what he does is he also turns around and is just like, you know what? You're allowed to not have it letter perfect. You don't have to have every single stroke in place. You just want it to give you that feeling of being a thing. And I think that that is something that's really changed how I've started approaching drawing. This idea that all I'm really looking for is a feeling of a thing is really incredible. I used to think that in order to be a successful artist, I had to have like photorealistic everything. And it's neat to me and really liberating. I make more art because of this, to realize that that's not an obligation. I don't need to do that. So yeah, that's been kind of a revelation, honestly. I wish that it was happening for more people because I think that it's super valuable. And it's funny because like that happened for me, I don't know, within the last 2 years, and I've been drawing for, God, I'm 34. So I've been drawing for 30 years at this point. And it's interesting that we kind of get to a place where we just assume that all we can do is what we can do. Take classes. Dude, even just wander around YouTube and decide, hey, I like what this person is doing. I'm going to try to follow along. It just makes everything so different. So, yeah. I guess I'm not like trying to plug Danny Gregory, except that I guess I sort of am. Like, he's done a lot to make me kind of reevaluate what my artistic practice needed to look like, what my creative practice needed to look like. So I also think the idea of thinking of it as a practice is pretty huge because you're never going to get where you want to go with it. I think everybody gets close, and I think certain people get closer than others in terms of their own confidence and feeling content with what they're capable of. But I have yet to meet an artist anywhere who doesn't wish they were better. And I think that that's important to recognize. I put up one of my maps in a mapping group on Facebook that I'm part of, and there's such a supportive community. Like, it's just fantastic. And we have a monthly competition, and I put up one of my maps, and my map won. And there was somebody that in the thread where we put up our maps was like, well, I'm not going to bother to put mine in because Shay's already put their map up and it's amazing and there's no way that I can compete with that. And I was like, well, okay, that kind of makes me feel crappy because I'm not here to try and make it so that other people don't want to share their work and don't feel comfortable, right? Like I never want to be the reason that somebody feels too intimidated to participate in something. Like, that's not cool. That's not what I'm here for. And so I said, like, this is a really safe space, and one of the hardest things about doing this is getting the confidence to just put yourself out there, which is something that I've struggled with forever. And he was like, there's no way you struggle with that. I was like, dude, you have no idea. Like, I swear to God, the biggest thing that I learned from finishing my master's thesis is that you just got to get it done. And it's not even in some cases like the work that you're doing, it's the fact that you finished. And it's a practice, right? You got to show up, get it done. And the more you do that, the better you get. I'm hugely inspired by a gentleman that goes under the moniker Runehammer, Hankerin Furanail. He's hilarious. Channel is Runehammer on YouTube. He is Dungeons and Dragons. He's an artist. He is a writer. He's a game designer. And he's legit one of the most fascinating people that I've found on the internet. When I first encountered him, he came across like someone I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy. And my partner got really into him, so we watched a fair amount of him. And now I love what he does. He's easygoing, he's super chill, he's very encouraging. He's like honestly just zen about a lot of things. I guess it's a terrible word, but it's the shorthand I guess I'm using right now. And he does art streams for commissions that he's working on. And I love his process because it's super forgiving. And he's like, you know what, if I'm not having fun, I'm not making good art. And that's the whole point is you gotta make good art. If you're here, good just means you had a good time doing it. That's revolutionary. It really is. And I think it's done a lot for me to get comfortable with what is the purpose of making art. Because, yeah, sometimes it is. You got to make money with it, you know? And if you're in that position, that's a really cool position to be in. I know that it's something that I've wanted for a really long time in my life. Like, I've always wanted to be an artist, and there were a lot of reasons why that was not considered a viable option, which I'm pretty sure a lot of artists here. And it feels a little strange to be in this position where I'm like, I'm gonna try to do it. But it's neat to hear someone that I regard as so talented, who has such a community following, express those same kinds of insecurities and doubts. And he's really fond of saying, like, I don't know how to draw. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of feeling my way through it. And that is pretty much how I feel all the time with all of these things. It's just feel your way through it. You'll get there. So, so yeah. That was a very long ramble. I'm not totally sure if that helps anybody other than me, but those are my thoughts on the subject. I guess I'm in a much chattier mood than last time. I hope that's alright. So yeah, we're just getting to the point where I'm getting a sense of size and scale and everything on this map. I've just about got it roughed in here. And then once it is, we'll be able to start inking. I think we're just about there. So one of the things that happened at Nerdly that kind of blew my mind is a friend of mine who was down there knows that I've recently gotten into painting miniatures for our Dungeons and Dragons game. And I've been posting some of what I've been doing on Facebook just to, because I live in a small town and I'm not near friends and stuff, and just it's a good way to kind of keep everyone in the loop of what I'm doing. And I have nerds, so they're always interested. And he's like, oh, you're doing a lot of this right now. I have all of these minis that I'm not using that I got in a Reaper Kickstarter years ago. Do you want them? It blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean, do I want them? And he was like, no, seriously, I'm not using them. They've sat in shelves in their boxes for years. And if you are going to use them, I would love you to have them because they will just make you very happy. And I like doing that kind of thing for my friends. And I said, sure. So he brought them to Nerdly. And oh my goodness, you guys, there's so many miniatures in there. Like, I can't, there's hundreds of them. And I've never really looked too hard at the Reaper catalog because I haven't really had the money to be in a position to spend it on things like minis. We're not like deathly bad or anything, but it's tight. Like we're having to be smart about the way that we're handling things. And gaming, as much as we love it and it's a really big hobby for us, it's still a luxury thing, right? So for Fox to be like, "Hey, I'd like to support you in this way," was just incredible. And then to have that support be just so generous, it was amazing. So we had game last night because it was Wednesday. Oh my goodness, we laughed so hard. So hard. It was just fantastic. And we had this huge selection of minis that we got to play with. They all need painting because they're just the white of a standard Reaper mini. But we have them, and I have a chance to kind of crack into painting them, and I think that'll be really cool. So my morning routine has changed a little bit. Normally, my partner and I drink coffee while we watch things like Stephen Colbert, and I kind of take some time to get my brain online. I'm really not at my best in the mornings. And now, while I drink coffee, I'm painting miniatures because it's a really good way to fit, a half an hour painting here, a half an hour painting there, into my day without having to carve in additional time that takes away from commissions and other art projects that I'm working on. While also still having enough of a regular routine to get things accomplished, so that the miniatures are able to be used for oncoming games. So that's really exciting. It does make me wake up faster because I need a much steadier hand. So that's something. So what I'm trying to do right now is just rough in the shape of the forests. I want to kind of get those in play before I start bringing in the actual details of each of the locations. Just trying to keep the edges kind of rough to indicate that there's elevation changes going on and different sizes of trees and things. I have a tendency to make the same kind of repeating pattern when I'm doing jagged spikes. And it's just what feels natural to my hand. And at a certain point, you can say, hey, that's stylistic. And at a certain point, you really have to work against it so that it doesn't look unnatural. So trying to keep myself in mind of that. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not going 100% over every single pencil line that I've generated when I was doing the rough out. Sometimes it just doesn't feel right. Sometimes it's not what my hand wants to do. And if it's one thing that Runehammer, Hankrin, I'm really never sure what to call him, advocates, it's just kind of letting your hand do what it's doing. He's fond of saying, your brain doesn't know what to do, but your hand does. And there's a certain amount of trust that goes into that, trusting the process. It's good for you, though. Good for me, anyway. I guess I shouldn't assume what's good for anyone else. That was probably some of the best and hardest advice I've ever been given, is just to trust the process. Let it happen and see where it goes. And it was given to me in the context of art and making art. But it's ended up being like the life advice that I just can't get over because it's been such a powerful thing for me. There is a process, just like there is a practice. And if you put some kind of commitment into it, you're going to get something out of it, which is neat. It's really, really neat. Now I have completely just run over the wrong set of lines. That's awesome. Alright. Forest, you go this way. Myrna, you just asked me a question and I don't understand the question. Green roller thingies. What are you talking about? For making the mini bases? Sorry, for those who don't know, I have a moderator for my chat, and she's wonderful. She's a serious hero, and she just asked me something, and I just noticed. Oh yeah, okay, so yeah, so the green roller thingies. No, we haven't gotten them. What they are a set of almost like Sprengerle style rolling pins. That probably doesn't help the explanation at all. They're a style of rolling pin that you can use on green stuff to add texture to it for making like mini bases and terrain and stuff like that. They're by a company called Green Stuff Works, I think it is. I'll try and find a link and put it down in the description. And they're a great way to kind of add a lot of quick texture, particularly if you don't have the inclination or the time to do it by hand or piece by piece or whatever. They're cheaper than a lot of the Hearst Art stuff, for example. I really want them. We just haven't had the ability to get them yet. A lot of my bases I'm doing just with flocking and gravel and that kind of thing. And I like them because they have a really unified look to them right now. But not all of my characters are going to exist in spaces where flocking and bases and everything is where we're at. So, alright, we're going to redraw this river a little bit here. Not with the pen, how about? Doo-doo-doo-doo. There we go. So this river will still run up close to the trees and into the trees, and that should be just fine. I may end up redrawing it. We'll just have to see how it goes. The great thing about being at this stage of the game is that I can do that, and it's not going to take me hours and hours of work to make that happen. One of the side effects of doing maps manually is that when errors do get made or when a client wants revisions, it requires a lot more work to get those edits into play. So usually we do a lot more drafting at the beginning to make sure the design is good. This one had less of a draft process because the client was able to give me a rough draft of what they were looking for. I have another friend that, it's a friend, so it's okay if this project takes years, and it very well might, where he's asking for maps for his world that he's been designing for like a D&D Pathfinder-esque style game for, oh my goodness, he's had it in the works for 15 years already. And it's really amazing. I respect his world building process so much. He's just so gifted when it comes to creating worlds and taking people through them. And he's been working on it forever, so the attention to detail and the amount of detail is just staggering. But he has never really thought about the particulars of his landscape. When I work on a map for myself, I'm working on them for my novel. So as part of my world building process, I've gone through how did the continents get shaped? What do the tectonic plates look like? How does that affect where my mountain ranges and my valleys are on a meta sense? I've done that process as best I can. I mean, I'm not a scientist, to make it as realistic as possible. And then that gives me the ability to kind of go from there in terms of adding detail and kind of zeroing in until you get to a much smaller place, like just a regional map, kind of like what we're doing here. And everything kind of ties together and works. And the way that Ian's process has gone is he's focused very much on how the cultural development has happened in these places. And it's a lovely way because then you know like the history of how these groups have interacted and what the trade routes are like and stuff. But he's never thought about how did the mountains get formed. He's just like, I need mountains here because it impacts how they travel. It's really neat. But as someone who's used to like looking at a landscape map and going, oh, I know how I would redraw that, having recourse to like this is the trade route but I don't really care what it goes through is really a fascinating way to approach a map. So we're going to collaborate on his map system, so that he gets a gorgeous map and I get the experience of trying to sort out how to get that information from someone who doesn't necessarily have it and what the process is like, to create it when I have that license to do it. So I'm really looking forward to that. He's one of my favorite people. I think that as a collaboration, it's going to work very well because we communicate so well together. And I think that's really important when you're working with another artist or another writer, is to have a really good sense of how they communicate, and it helps to kind of keep everyone on the same page and get the results that everyone's after. I've had a lot of new commissions come into my sphere lately, for individual mapping projects for like game maps and stuff, but also I've had a D&D module come in for an independent creator who's designing games to introduce kids to playing in the hobby. And I love the idea of this. I think I would have started playing a lot younger if those kinds of resources had been available where I was. And I think it's really good for people because the socialization and the problem solving, I think, is super important. So it's really exciting to be working on that. And it's also a different style of art, right? Because I get to do stuff that's really cartoony and a lot of fun. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I just realized I'm working off of a piece of the map that you guys can't really see. So let's move it over. How about that? Hey, that's better. So yeah, it's been really exciting to, think about what does a druid's hut look like? And I have to design a logo for the Salmon's Spyglass, which is an inn and tavern in town. And I love that idea. Like, it's just such a whimsical name, and how do you represent that, right? What does a Salmon's Spyglass look like when you have to make a sign for it? I think I talked about the salmon last week too. I've gotten contacted by a few authors now, and that's really exciting. Kind of daunting in some ways, but just so cool. It's because I write, I understand a lot of the process that goes into creating the world, and I'm pretty precious about like who I share that with and the process and stuff. Like I have a collaborative author that I'm working with, a friend of mine. And I can work with him, but I don't know how it would be to like share this with other people. So, letting someone else in to your process can be challenging, particularly when you're looking for them to to enrich a part of it that you're not necessarily capable of doing, like drawing the map that you want or something like that. So it feels very much like an honor to get asked, and then like a lot of responsibility, to make sure that this turns out the way that they want it to turn out, because it's important. It's super important. But yeah, things are full of projects right now, and that is a wonderful place for everything to be. The one map community that I'm part of on Facebook, is talking about doing like pop competitions, not competitions, but like contests for, you know, just quick draw off a compass rose kind of thing. I like the idea of that because I think it'll level the playing field within the community a little bit, because there's people who are doing really cool things who, you're not getting judged on just a compass rose when you're entering competitions and stuff. So I think it will help kind of give more people their due, I guess is a good way to say that. And also, just, I like little challenges sometimes. It's better than spending 25 hours, 30 hours on a single map. Just be like, oh, I can knock this thing off in an hour, which is always a good way to like test your own skills. How fast can you do it? Tends to cut down on the overthinking that I'm so prone to. And they were like, funkiest colors. Like, what if we give you 6 colors and you can only use those colors to make a map? Like, how would you do it? And I think that's just so much fun. I didn't know this until recently. I found it on Instagram, but Copic, the Copic marker company, I love their markers. I use them a lot. They do like color combination of the month kind of things, where they'll choose 3 markers and you can get them through, I think it's their Copic store online, and then you can draw with them and tag them in what you make, and you can follow that hashtag and see what people are doing with just like 3 or 4 markers, because it's usually 3 colors plus black plus white. And I mean, it's great advertising for them because it proves the flexibility of the material in hardcore ways. But it's also really interesting just because I'm getting exposed to other people's art through the hashtag. There's just so much art on Instagram. I love it. It's probably my favorite platform for that reason. Just everybody's doing so many cool things, and you can set up like what you want to follow, how those hashtags go. And it's completely wonderful. I'm a huge fan. So that's a lot of density, and these ones are more spread out. I think the best part of all of this is I like to be busy. It's really nice to be busy doing something that I love so much. I was talking about this with a friend last night, that whole adage of do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And when I was in grad school, that phrase frustrated me so much, because the state of the academy right now is a super frustrating situation. And even though you were doing all of this work and dedicating your life and kind of the difficulties of grad school, I don't really need to get into that. There was no guarantee that you were going to be able to find work afterwards, which was a really vexing proposition when you were doing so much to try and make sure that happened. And it's true to a certain extent. Like, I don't find this work. It's effort, sure, but it's not like the drudgery that I associate with the word work. But there's also, I'm in a privileged position where I don't have to make a standardized living with it at this point. And so I have to really be aware that that's a thing. I think we lose track of how much patronage is really involved with keeping a full-time visual artist going, because visual arts don't pay in a, you know you're going to have the same paycheck every 2 weeks kind of setup. Like, you get paid in lump sums, and if you're not good with budgeting, that can be a problem. The irregularity of it creates a lot of challenges for artists who are in that area, because you still got your own stuff that needs to get handled, even while your pay periods are irregular and stuff like that. I've heard it's much the same for writers. Having never done anything with writing that would have resulted in paying bills, I can't speak to that at all. So I think platforms like Patreon are really cool. I've recently gotten on there myself, but I also think as a society we just kind of need to get a little more awareness going of the ways that art comes into our lives and how we consume it. Because I think a lot of people go, oh, I don't consume art. Well, yeah, you do. Like, you listen to music, you deal with apps on your phone, you probably like advertising on some level. Those are all art things. And that's what artists go to school for, or don't. But they train, right? They put the time in, they have that practice. And the more they do that, the more results that you're likely to like. And so supporting them gives you the results that you want. And this is true in all fields. I think it just somehow gets lost in the thinking somehow when it comes to visual arts. They're handled kind of weirdly, I guess, in some ways, about like, we don't need to pay for that. Like, it's free, it's online. Well, that's cool, but also, you know, it's a thing. You'd want to be supported if you were doing something for your livelihood too. So, and you should be. I think fundamentally all people deserve that. So we're getting really, really close to the 1 hour mark here, and I'm feeling good about the rough end that I've got going on. I think I'll be able to get this map done today. I will try to find that link that I mentioned earlier for the green stuff rollers and get that into the description. I will make sure I have a copy of this to show you guys at the beginning of next week, just to show you how it all kind of wrapped up now that it's done. And I guess we are going to take another couple minutes and then sign off. So thanks for hanging out with me. It was cool. And we will do it again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. I've never gotten to say that for myself before. That's kind of fun. Oh, I guess I should say, if you want to find me on Instagram or Patreon, I'm Monocled Octopus on both of those platforms. Instagram is currently where I'm the most active. I'm posting my 100 Days project there, which is just sketches that I'm doing for the world building for my novel. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's a really, really neat process to kind of stick yourself with a soft deadline and a project It's pushing me to learn a lot about my world. And I feel like that's a really great place to be with NaNoWriMo coming up in November. I should be done my 100 Days project by the end of October. I'm not sure if I'm doing Inktober this year or not, considering that I've got this 100 Days thing overlapping for most of the month. But NaNoWriMo is near and dear to my heart, so that is definitely a thing I'm going to have to make sure I've got room for. So yeah, if you want to find me on Instagram, I am Monocled Octopus. If you want to find me on Patreon, I am also Monocled Octopus. And that's pretty much the handle. I like the handle, it works for me. Okay, that takes us to 10:30, so I am going to bug out for now, and I will see you guys next week. I hope you have an amazing week and a great weekend, and if you are creating or gaming, the muses are with you and the dice are in your favor. Have a good one.